Hey guys, my name's River, and this is Deconstructing Darkness, a new podcast where I, your host, will help break down perceivingly scary things in spirituality, trauma, endings, and new beginnings. Join myself and others as we bring light to the darkness to reveal that they are just calls to action, tools to deepen, and the path to take our power back. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and share for more. Welcome to the first episode, you guys. This is probably my 70th actual take of an episode attempt. I feel like I should be keeping a list of reasons at this point why I've been deleting episodes and redoing the very first episode. I think when you work on something for so long, like for me at least, as I've worked on Deconstructing Darkness, I have like so many ideas for the second, third, fourth, fifth guests, other podcasts I want to pull on, whatever. But actually doing the first episode has been the hardest thing. And it's like, I got a haircut and I'm trying to figure out how to style my bangs. And so I'll record and I look back on the recording and I see that my bang was in my eye the whole time. And I can't even pay attention to what I'm saying because I'm staring at my hair. Anyway, I have scrapped episodes over the dumbest reasons, but honestly, it just hasn't felt like the right time. Like now just feels like the right time to finally be able to do the episode, which is so silly because I think I'm saying the same exact thing in all of them, but I just had to be here now to finally get this out, I guess. Like I said, this is the first episode, so I appreciate the graciousness, the patience as I refine myself doing this job as a host with my likes and my ums and my ands has been something that I've never really cared about as long as I was expressing what I was saying, and I still kind of feel that way. I still kind of feel that way. I know that you're supposed to be really articulate and stuff, but I need to just get this out because I have been working on this for so long. So it's getting out. I am so excited for what I do have in store. But for the first episode, I think I just want to do some housekeeping and set the scene for what I want to create with this podcast. There's so many different topics that we could cover with a name like Deconstructing Darkness. And that's perfect. That's exactly what I want. I want this to be as vague, but also as specific as it needs to be. I found myself about a year and a half ago in a place that I could not find resources on what I was experiencing. Couldn't find anything. And I was like, wow, this is really dark stuff. And I would really like some help with this. But there was really not a lot of people that were able to help me in what I was in. And so it kind of sparked this rabbit hole journey as I've gone through that experience and come out of it on the other end. I've been able to gain a lot of information and tools and knowledge that I've used to help me go through my own darkness and my own shadows and other people's darkness and other people's shadows that they've projected onto me or used to control me and have really like learned a lot from that experience. I've had a lot of experiences in darkness, and that doesn't mean that I am the darkness. Let's just make it known that I only work with truth and love. That's it. I only ever work with truth and love. Those are the two modes of operation that I live by. And I think that that can be hard because people are like, well, what about light and love? And we hear that so much. We hear that so much in the spiritual community where it's like, oh, just light and love, just light and love. And I'm like, but what about the shadow? What about that not to be like, but evil? No, I'm talking about the shadow because we are half light and we are half dark, and we cannot separate those two. So it's light and dark. It's integration. It's gray. It's a mixture. And if we continue to just perpetuate the light, then we're just going to live in shame and self-loathing, which is what I had been doing for a while. And it takes a lot of time to kind of work out that and work through that. So I've really gone through a bunch of these different types of experiences. My expertise will be mainly in what I think people would consider spiritual darkness. There's so many different types of darkness. And before we dive into spiritual darkness, I think I want to cover the most generally accepted type of darkness, which is mental health darkness. And I think this is a really, really, really important darkness to cover, right? We all experience mental darkness, whether it's anxiety, depression, suicidal ideations. We know somebody that committed suicide, the PTSD. I mean, we all get fucked in the mind, right? You can't be a human on this planet at this time, period, and not have some level of mental darkness that you've experienced. I don't care how good your life is. Like I said, it is both. It is not just one. Now, the extent of that darkness and how an individual handles that is going to be up to them. But we all understand what it means when we say, oh, I'm feeling sad or oh, I'm feeling depressed. And we have therapists that we can go to and we have books that we can read. And there's lots of resources for mental darkness, for mental health, for the darkness that we find inside of our brains, inside of ourselves. I think that the most important thing I've ever learned is how to regulate my body. Deep breaths. Really important. I forget to breathe. I will talk so fast as I've been trying to record these episodes. I'll turn bright red and I'll realize that I haven't taken a breath in 3 minutes. And you can bet that my system is dysregulated when I'm in those places. I have so much trauma that I am always trying to regulate and I'm always trying to understand what's going on in my body and where things are coming from, how it feels inside of myself. That awareness is your superpower. That is the most important thing that I think we can learn is just how to tell our bodies that we're safe and that we can experience whatever's coming up inside of ourselves. So, as your host, I am consistently working on regulating my body. As I talk about traumatic things that either I've gone through or I hold space for trauma that others are sharing with me, I will be working on regulating my body. I encourage you, as the listener, to pause this episode, pause future episodes, and don't be scared to take deep breaths. You can come back to this. We don't need to be marathon healers. We don't need to be marathon deconstructors. We don't need to be marathon integrators. This life is really long. And like I mentioned earlier, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, I'm really impatient. So, if I could be told that I could just stick myself in a room for 6 months out of the year and sob uncontrollably and then come out and have 6 months without crying, I would do that. I would get through everything that I could when I could do it. But it would probably kill me, and that's why we have to take these breaks. That's why we have to regulate our bodies. You immediately will disassociate from me if your body's not regulated. And that's kind of what I'm doing with this podcast. As a society, we are largely disassociated from our bodies. I mean, how could we not be? How could we not be disassociated from our bodies with so many different aspects that we could go into? And we'll get into them, right? We'll have space for all of them. But I want to create a space where we can come and check into our bodies, to check into ourselves, to check into our minds, to check into our souls, to kind of take inventory about what's going on in there. We oftentimes have a really hard time confronting things that we find scary naturally. I know I do. And it's been a work in progress to learn how to be able to see things as they really are and integrate them with love. We as a society have a really hard time facing things that we don't like to face. And because of that, it exacerbates issues and it makes them worse. I think we all know that. Our ability to check out is what creates other people's ability to control our reality. And if we don't wake up, if we don't snap in, if we don't come to, and if we don't actually take inventory of what's going on, nothing's ever going to get better and nothing's ever going to change. It's just going to keep perpetuating the problem. And we all know this, I believe, to our core that, I mean, obviously, if we're having to disconnect, if we're having to disassociate from our bodies, it's probably because our bodies are in some sort of state of trauma. It's probably because they're experiencing anxiety. It's probably because it's experiencing depression. Whatever kind of mental label that you want to put on yourself that you're experiencing, it's a warning flag. It's a warning sign. It's asking for attention. They're saying fire, 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 whatever it is. Your body is your barometer and it is trying to tell you to listen. And with us regulating our bodies and using our coping tools and being aware of what's coming up internally, I want to make sure that no one's getting gaslit or invalidated out of what's really happening. I think that for so much of the time when we finally come back into our bodies and we kind of see that the house is on fire and we go to get help for it, people tell us that the house isn't on fire. People tell us that things are fine. Oh, they're not that bad. Oh, you should be thankful. Look at this country. Look at how they're living. And if we dare say something or act out or bring to attention something that might be crumbling, a structure that might be breaking, a foundation that has cracks in it, we're told that we're wrong or we're told that things aren't as bad as they seem. And that is just not what I'm going to do on this platform. I want to validate everything. I want to validate the trauma. I want to validate how hard it is to be living right now. And that's just the truth. I know people should say that it's been easier than ever and that we're just a bunch of weak little assholes. But like that really isn't what's going on. There's something so much greater and so much deeper and a large scale magnitude of something that's happening right now. And I have been feeling this for the last 4 years. They've been when I say they, I'll say they a lot. I'll say, "They've been talking to me," and people are like, "Who? Who?" Once again, I only work with truth and love, okay? So, keep that in mind, but I am a, like, a psychic medium, whatever you wanna call it. I am connected to a different realm that's not in a physicality of right in front of us. It's not a 5 sense reality. It is somewhere that I go and I commune and I talk to either wounded parts of myself, it could be healed parts of myself, it could be future parts of me or a future me that wants to come and give me some piece of information about something that's coming in the future. I talk to archangels, I talk to star beings, I talk to there's so many different there's just so much going on. There's so much going on. And take all of this with a grain of salt. If you hear this and you're like, "Oh, she's this is interesting." Okay, that's fine. That's okay. This is interesting, right? That not everybody is going to really align with my perception or my way of living, and that's okay. I feel things emotionally. I'm an extremely emotional being. I'm very empathic, very highly sensitive, whatever you want to call it. And honestly, we all are. Whether you have chosen to disassociate from your connection or not, you are still super attached and super connected to everything that's going on. People can say that they're not tuned in, tapped in, intuitive, whatever, but we are, and we have just cut that off or we've buried it so deep down that we don't think it's there anymore. But I have watched people pull this out from inside of themselves. And so as I talk about they or my team or my spirits or God, the all, whatever it may be, ultimately what I'm discussing, what I'm talking about, what I'm tapping into, it's this little piece of love that is inside every single one of us. And it lives in our heart. And we all literally have it. You can feel it. Once again, you might be disassociated from it or cut off from it, or you might be actively trying not to feel it because it's a protection, something going on inside of your mind that's trying to keep you safe. But we all have it, and we inherently have it. We're born with it. We come with it. This is our heart space. I worked under this healing practitioner, shaman, and she taught me some really good lessons. And one of the lessons that she taught me was the difference between the head space and the heart space. And when you're in your head space, this is where you're doing your bills and you're driving your car and you're doing math problems or science or logic or whatever it may be. But every other time besides something like that, you should be in your heart space. When we're petting an animal, when we're interacting with a child, when we're creating art, that all comes from our heart space. And this is just inherent in humans. Babies have it, adults have it, kids have it. It doesn't matter if you're human, you have this. And it's not even with humans. It's this heart space of life, of God, of whatever you want to call it, of love. And it weaves in between everything. It weaves through my heart into yours, into the next person, into the other 8 billion people on here, into the earth, into the rocks, into the trees, up into the stars. And it is the energy of creation, of love, of God, of whatever you believe. That's what that is. That's what I'm talking about when I refer to team, spirit, guide, God. So we all have this, and we can all choose to let it out, to work with it, to listen to it, to ignore it, whatever we want to do. As I sit here and talk to you guys and film this, I'm going to be actively trying to talk out of my heart space. I'm going to be trying to connect to you through my heart space. And I hope you feel me in your heart space, but you might not, and that's okay. But I think that this is probably the most powerful tool that we have. I don't think I know. We all know that love is the most powerful thing, right? At least that's what a lot of people say. Love, light, God, whatever you want to call it. It's the strongest thing that we have. It's the strongest emotion. And I wanna really kind of highlight and expand on that specific thought, that idea of Alexandra Wenman, who's this wonderful healing practitioner, calls it your indestructible heart space. I think I'm saying that right. I'm probably butchering it a little bit. But it's our indestructible light, our indestructible soul space. And we are entering and we are in some really heavy things as a humanity, as a collective. Especially the younger generations are really starting to feel this, and they've been feeling this. My generation, the millennials, And then especially Gen Z, I think, have been really understanding that how things have been going are not how they are going to keep continuing. It just can't. The society can no longer sustain itself anymore. And I know that when you say that, people can freak out and be like, "Oh my gosh, what does that mean?" But that doesn't mean that people need to start rioting and burning down Capitol buildings or something. Like, it just means that we need to start having open, honest, heart-centered conversations about these topics. And that a lot of people, when I say things like that, bring in kind of more of like they call it realism. "Oh, I'm just a realist," and I'm like, or a pessimist, but they think they're a realist, that's fine. And that the idea that you'll never be able to get everybody on the same page or in their heart space or whatever you call it, and that's true. Like, this podcast isn't gonna resonate with some people, but it will really resonate with others. But just as much as humans are scared of the darkness, and this really amazing, once again, another practitioner, her name's Carolyn Miss, she has this book called The Courage to Confront Evil, and in it, she talks about how people are really scared of the darkness, but people are just as scared of the light. And that is true too. You bring up the idea of a better world or improving society, creating a better culture, internally becoming a better person. And quite often you're met with a realist or a pessimistic view to say that the light isn't possible. There's no way that we can carry more. There's no way that we could integrate that deeper. Things aren't going to get better. They just are as they are. So then we find ourselves scared of the dark and scared of the light, and our body's on fire, the house is on fire, and so we check back in, and either way that you go to is just kind of a coping mechanism. But it's perpetuating all of the issues that are keeping the house on fire. That indestructible soul self, that heart space, this thing that resides in us that can grow and become bigger, or we can choose to cut off and shove down and act like isn't there. That is the only way that humans have ever been able to make any type of change throughout human history. It is through that heart space. And I think that we talk about evolution, we talk about physical human evolution, and there's a lot of science and facts to back that up. But then I think we could also talk about cultural and spiritual conscious evolution that we all have, either as a collective, a large group of people, or an individual. We all are spiritually evolving. That is what is happening. Humans spiritually evolve. That is where we're at right now and what we're asked to do again in this moment. And to spiritually evolve is really painful. It's looking at things that you don't really want to look at. And I think that could also be what people refer to as shadow work, is because when we finally choose to stop disassociating and seeing these things, it can be really painful and it can be really scary. But it's through this heart space that humans have been able to endure and actually progress. I mean, we can look at generations that have come before us, not even just in the United States of America, but just looking at that, we can see the women's suffrage movement, we can see the civil rights movement, and then worldwide, we can see a ton of initiatives over the course of human history that have been groups of people that have come to make the world a better place, whether that's orchestrated or not and just a fluke. Humans spiritually and culturally evolve like we do physically. And that spiritual or conscious evolution comes from this space. It is this same space that is what keeps humans going in the most horrific, tragic, obscene circumstances that a human could experience. We can see so many survivors of just the most atrocious things that humans have ever done. There are people that are continuing on that are in war torn, heavily bombed countries to continue enduring really horrific things that might be being done to them and their loved ones, to continue enduring totalitarian governments, to continue enduring rights being stripped away, to endure assault after assault after assault. There's so many things that humans can survive, and they survive those things through their heart space, through this God consciousness, through this connection, this heart space that we have with each other. It is only by tapping into those things that we can survive the most atrocious, the most dark things that this life, that other humans have to offer. That is the only way that we get through that. You hear people that have overcome suicidal ideations, and you often hear them say, "I don't know how I did it. I don't know how I'm still here." And it's because they wanted to be. It's because that life force continued to live and it won. And I really would love to hold space for people that have been in the darkest of the dark, that have been able to tap into that heart space, tap into that exponential power, that limitless, unbreakable power that we have inside of all of us to continue to thrive. And maybe it's not even just thrive, maybe it's survive. Maybe it's surviving for years and then eventually figuring out how to turn that survival into some sort of thriving. There is an alchemizing that takes place when we're given really hard things, really heavy shit. And I think that we often don't know how to meet people in those spaces. I know that I have been so overwhelmed so many times when I've had a client come to me and they have had some really heavy trauma. I am not I may be in the trenches with you guys, and I'm dealing with my own mental health and my own shit, but I'm not perfect, and there have been plenty of times that somebody's come and said something that they experienced that I had absolutely no idea what to say. And by the grace of spirit and channeling and God or whatever you call it, I'm always given the right information to give them and the right way to kinda succor them and help them, but that's not mine. That sure as shit ain't mine. And so when I'm not in a session and somebody comes to me with something like that, I have tools now that I can use and I have framework that I've had and learned from my own sessions with people to provide them comfort. But before that, I had no idea how to do that. And I find that now in my own life. As I've gone through some really crazy intense trauma and people ask me what happened, what's going on, I want to hear the tea. And I tell them quite often it's just a blank face. Either they disassociated because what I was saying was so traumatic or unbelievable or just not fathomable that they couldn't listen anymore, and so they checked out about 2 minutes in of the 15-minute conversation, or they just literally don't know what to say. They just look at you blank-faced, and so many times that happens too, or they come back and they're like, "Oh, yeah, I was assaulted this way," or however it may be, and because their story has never been validated, they've never gone to therapy, they've never gotten help, they immediately just invalidate you. "Oh, yeah, that happened to me too, same girl, same, yeah, got you." And then it creates this lack of connection, and we don't have a community when we need a community for the most horrific things that we go through because nobody's validating themselves and nobody's validating each other. And I think that's really kind of changed, especially like I said, with mental health kind of becoming more of a norm and more talked about and destigmatized, and that's been great. There's more groups and more help. But I think when it comes to talking about really dark things, not even necessarily what humans experience, like in a mental darkness or trauma that maybe external sources inflict on us, but also about our own darkness. I think that it kind of depends on what your own preconceived notions are, but we all inherently have darkness in us. We are half light and we are half dark, and we can't separate the two. And a lot of religions perpetuate this idea that the darkness is external to you, that the darkness is something that's like maybe an entity or a demon, like I said earlier, that's actively walking around with like a pack of cigarettes trying to get you to take one and smoke. And while I'll never invalidate the existence of negative beings, I will say that if there is a temptation that one is feeling or a shadow that one is seeing and having a hard time not being able to get control of, it's because it's you. It's because it's inside you. I remember when I was LDS or Mormon, I was raised Mormon, and I was 19 and I was really dealing with my sexuality, like hardcore. It had been something that I had been repressing for a really long time. And I just remember thinking that the devil wanted me to kiss a girl so bad. And I'm really actually just queer. I like men and women. And that was something that was really hard for me to understand because I thought it wasn't me. It was something that I was being tempted with. And, do what you want and believe what you want and think what you want, but ultimately I was gay. Like ultimately I was queer. I liked women, and that was something that was inside of myself that I wanted to either label as darkness or project external to myself that kept me from actually looking at that real issue. And just like I said, how that heart space, that God consciousness lives inside of us, if we imagine that that also holds our darkness, that also holds our shadows. And I think that there's been a lot more reframework around shadow work, which has been great. And I really love the idea that our shadows are just as potent and just as important as our light is. And we have to have darkness. We have to. It's just inherent. I have to be able to be nice, but if somebody is pushing my boundaries or testing me, I have to be able to be mean. Sometimes you have to be able to pull these things out from your tool belt to throw them on the table when you need it because we can't just be light all the time, unfortunately, because we live in a world where people don't check their dark. And when people don't check their dark, it's really easy for somebody else to control. It's really easy. And when I say controlled, I mean we live in a society where we literally have a job called influencers. We have been conditioned to be influenced. That's just a part of our society. They have to be able to market to us so we can buy their products. And that's also just like psychology 101. When you go into marketing, I don't know if this is how it is still, but at least 10 years ago when I took psychology and marketing, it was like kind of one and the same. They were like, how can we make the general public feel like enough garbage that they'll buy our product? How can we put the most beautiful women that we've ever seen in our mascara to make them think that if they wear this mascara, they will be that attractive? That was like the whole 2000s beauty industry. And that just left so many women absolutely ravaged with eating disorders and self-loathing and wanting to be skinny and not being skinny enough, and it's just kind of perpetuated that ever since, and I think they've gotten a little bit more politically correct with it, but ultimately, I think that we have been conditioned to think that we're not good enough without having something, right? Like, I need to have this product so I can be good enough. I need to do this so I can be worthy, and then it's kind of along the same idea of religion. And this is if you live a religion, I think it can be great. It can really benefit individuals, but it's kind of the idea that we weren't born inherently with this light, with this God consciousness, with this ultimate complete whole part of ourselves. And as we've gone about our lives, we've just put blocks on top of it. Like, oh, I'm not worthy to feel this. I'm not good enough to feel this. I'm not spiritual enough. I'm not clairvoyant, whatever it may be. We just keep putting blocks and blocks and blocks on it, and it keeps it from coming out. So we can continue to reaffirm that belief. Oh, see, I'm not spiritual. Oh, see, I don't have this isn't real. None of this actually exists because I don't feel it because you've put so many blocks on top of it. So it creates this kind of achievement level for worthiness and for love and for spirit and for God. We might not even be aware that we have all of these blocks because we have a conscious mind and we have a subconscious mind. And I'm just going to talk about these a little bit in this first episode. We'll break down these a lot more in the coming episodes. In our conscious brain, the lights are on. We can see everything in the room and we decorated the room and we put things how we wanted in the room. And this is how the room should look. And then every once in a while, we open the door or something happens in our life where we're like, well, that was really weird. Why'd I say that? Or, wow, I just got triggered over something that I didn't even know was going to trigger me. And so we open the door and maybe we see that like our bookshelf has fallen over and now there's a big hole behind the bookshelf that we didn't know was there that all of a sudden is protruding. And so we go to fix the bookshelf and then we shut the door and then we start living our lives. And then all of a sudden something else happens where you're triggered again and you're acting out in ways that you didn't think you wanted to act or you thought that this isn't in my room. This is not what we do. So you go back in the room and then all of a sudden you notice that your bed's flipped over and it's not made and it's stained and it's just dirty. And so now you have to find a new bed sheet. Anyway, this is an analogy that you can go on for days, but there is something that is actually going on below our conscious brain, and that's our subconscious brain. And that is what holds every single memory, every single trauma, every single belief that you have gained throughout your existence here. I know so many people think that we just don't remember everything, or I hear a lot of people say, I don't even remember my childhood. And that's common. As unfortunate as that is, that's common. And I used to say that all the time. It probably wasn't until 2 years ago that I really, really remembered my childhood and then a year and a half, I actually started unrepressing repressed memories. And that was a whole talk about subconscious. That's a big part of why I'm doing this. And we'll get into my story and that will all unravel. But we have a subconscious that holds all of these memories. And the subconscious, you could consider the dark, similar to how in our heart space, it's half light and it's half dark. And that is where we tap into God. That's where we tap into ourselves, into our emotions. We also have a dark and a light. We have a conscious and a subconscious. And things from the subconscious are usually what create the light. And we'll get into that and we'll dive more into that about how if we're unaware of something, it is going to actively try to be seen. So if I have something that I've been suppressing and I've been shoving down into my subconscious, there will be things that happen in my waking reality, my external world, whether it's coming from my own behavior or triggering behavior from others, that tries to get me to see that so I can deal with it. And I think that we as a society are dealing with so many collective triggers and so many collective, I guess you could call them demons, shadows, whatever you want to refer to them as, and we don't even know how to hold this space to look at them because we've never done that in ourselves. Because that's really scary to be like, wow, I have been dating my dad for 32 years and my kids have been so abused and neglected and had shit father figures because I had a shit father figure. And that is so hard to have to sit with. Or even worse, like I think a lot of people don't want to think that they're perpetuating cycles of abuse, but usually we are. If we have been abused and we continue to not look at that and be unaware of that abuse, it's likely that we will perpetuate that and recycle it to try to make sense of it in our waking conscious reality. There's so many things that I think we are unaware of, and I know just for myself there's so many things that I'm still unaware of, and it's been such a journey to try to understand that. But if we do not create the space and take the time to let our subconscious put things in the room. If we just keep shoving the door and acting like we cleaned our room, it should be done. I already worked on that. I already did that. Then it's going to keep coming up. We have to be willing to maybe go sit in the room, turn off the lights, and just be and see what happens. There's so many pieces that need to be unraveled and deconstructed that I want to get into and hold space for. But for this first episode, I think that the main thing I'm trying to say is that the darkness is not coming from outside of you, it's coming from inside of you. And the light is not coming from outside of you, it's coming from inside of you. And in order to enter into these spaces that we are trying to enter so we can heal ourselves and help heal society, we need to be able to not project that. While there are negative or service to self beings, entities, or people out there, there is nothing, there is nothing that they can do that can take away from your indestructible soul self. It's interesting because you hear people say this, especially about Hollywood, about people that, oh, you sold your soul to the devil, or they made a deal with the devil and now they're famous and this and that. And well, I also want to get into all of that and all of things like that. But let me tell you that if you made a deal with the devil or you sold your soul to the devil, you didn't. They cannot ultimately kill or take out that soul piece that you have. There is no amount of Satanism or occult ritualistic abuse that cannot be undone. And I say that because that's what I repressed. Like really intense stuff that was happening. And I didn't know it existed. And who do you go to for things like that? Especially when you're the victim, everything's so triggering, everything's so traumatizing already. Like, who do you turn to? And I've been lucky to find the resources that I need and the people that I need, but it's definitely been quite the unraveling. And I'm so grateful that I have learned that there is nothing, absolutely nothing, that anyone can do or make you do in any sort of way, type, form, or state that can get you to sacrifice, eliminate, or get rid of your God consciousness, your love, your heart. And we as humans are being asked and being told to call more on that energy now than ever. There's some really dark shit that I want to cover. There's some really scary things that I want to talk about, but they aren't that scary. They just are. And I think that I have had a lot of fear around coming forward about a lot of the things that I've experienced because people talk about like this satanic panic craze that happens. And it starts this, for lack of a better word, witch hunt. And that's not at all how that works. That's not at all what's going on. It is shadows of people that are perpetuating these cycles for different reasons, and it's not for the reasons that I think a lot of people think it's for. It's not for Satanism, it's for their own type of occult power, their own type of control, their own type of ability to make people forget or have control over people. There's so many different things that they're doing with these practices, and it gets really, really, really dark, right? It can get really dark. And so that will definitely be some of the platform that I have. The only way I have been able to navigate through that. The only way that I've been able to stay alive through the course of these things is through my indestructible soul self. It didn't matter how how many occult groups were psychically attacking me or are psychically attacking me, that they will never be able to kill that part of me. And even if they kill my physical body, I will still have that part of me. We come here with it and we will leave here with it. I know that that is how we continue to expand and grow as humans. It is through that love. It is through the truth. It is through being willing to sit in those uncomfortable things and not disassociating and not invalidating the dark and also not invalidating the light, because we need to bring both of them together. A lot of what I'm sharing is going to be really dark, and a lot of the people that I'll have on will also be sharing really dark things, or what we perceive as darkness and what we feel scared of. But I like, once again, like I said, regulating our bodies, staying tapped in, staying tuned in, not disassociating out of it, and being willing to hold it and see what comes up for it. Throughout the course of the last year and a half, as I've gone through what I've gone through and kind of sorted through all of this, the one thing that has kind of kept me going, that I feel really strongly about and really believe in, is that where we're going is better than where we've ever been, infinitely. So with all of that being said, I know it was so much, and we will deconstruct and get into more of it. Feel free to drop your questions down below. I have an Instagram and I'm on YouTube and Spotify, hopefully at this point. So feel free to comment, like, share. That's it. I think I covered everything. With where we're going, infinitely better than where we've ever been, I invite you to join me on this journey as we head towards deconstructing our own darkness, our loved ones' darkness, strangers' darkness, and the world's darkness, that we might be able to do that in love and truth. And I can't wait for the next episode. I hope you guys all have a great week, month, day, however long until you listen to the next episode. And I will catch you guys later.